Hey everybody, build update video for my previous build now that the patch has been rolled out, and you can see some changes already. One that I'm super happy for is that the FLUGEL has been calibrated to be a bit more of a melee-centric, well I shouldn't say melee-centric, but it works as a more evasive style and faster moving, but worse EN conservation melee build. And this has actually allowed me to use the albacore. I benefit more now from the booster efficiency, given that I have more EN issues if I'm going to run this booster. But I've been able to tailor it to be, instead of midweight, going more lighter midweight, and it's working out really well. I'm going to go into some clips now. I'm going to show some of the matchups and some of the strategies I've learned, and then we'll just talk about the different techs and stuff that I've come up with since I've been playing this. You'll also notice that I swapped the missile launcher, even despite the nerf. I was actually on this one even before the patch changed. Decided, and it was just because of the reload time was 3 seconds. They did nerf that slightly, but it's still fast enough to reliably keep impact from regenerating for kites, which is what we're going to use it for. This melee build has different matchup strengths and weaknesses versus my other melee build. I find that this one is quite good at vientos, kites, and like some of the more trickier ones for the melee build that I had trouble catching, lamb kites. However, it's not as good against some of the other tankier builds that the Slicer was doing a lot of work, i.e. heavy bipeds, particularly lasers. Because of this shield, it's not that good at damage mitigation. I do predict that they are gonna buff the Coral Blade damage and charge damage, and hopefully also the cooling slightly, just so that you don't need the shotgun stagger extend as well. I don't mind that. I just find it is a little bit limiting to force to kind of force this much work into making this thing able to punish off of a stagger. But most deliberately, I think the stat that needs the most amount of attention is the damage on the lunge, and the charge attack power probably needs at least I would say a 25% buff, actually, not at least. I think that 25% would be substantial. The attack power ought to be around 1900. I could maybe take 1700, I guess. The thing is, this thing does not have a mini stun, unlike the Pulse Blade, and so it's more prone to being a trade weapon. And given that like a lot of melee builds will have, or sorry, a lot of midweight builds will have over 10k health, you need to be doing chunks, like when you land this thing. If they're not dodging it, if they're not parrying it with a shield, it cannot be languishing behind the Pulse Blade, which on average you'll see around 25% mitigation, unless they're a tank. But yeah, this damage is just not cutting it for those types of builds when you realize that you're likely going to be needing to hit 10 of these to take out somebody with 13,000 health. That's way too much for how much you'll be eating when you're using this blade. But that's for another day, I suppose. I did swap to the Kassar, and I'm pretty sure it's because there has been some changes to shields and stun gun interactions. I'm not sure, but I have a clip later here that will show. But my status build-up seems a lot faster, especially with those therapists also being seen right now more. I don't think that they're actually that good, but we'll see. I feel like they need more impact, but yeah, that's another conversation for another day, I suppose. Other than that, I think everything else here makes sense. I did try experimenting with the VP20D to see if this capacity was worth it. I feel like if it was worth it, it was going to be worth it on a Coral build, because the Coral's EN requirements are huge, and so having a melee build that maybe trades a bit of capacity but solves that issue would have been nice. The problem is the EN recharge delay. So as a melee build, you can't be waiting 1.3 seconds just to get your one quick boost back in the middle of your combos. Like a lot of times when I'm drained on battery and I'm shotgun stagger extending, I want to have at least one thrust ready to go so I can QB cancel into the shotgun Coral Blade punish. So as of now, I'm gonna have to retract something I was thinking earlier. This EN recharge delay is not worth it, at least on the albacore. I could look at swapping it around, I guess. Again, I'm really stoked that I can finally make the albacore work. I don't think that it's going to make a difference, though. Yeah, no, I think that that's still too severe. So, no mas. Okay, let's jump into the clips, and I'll talk about some of the different matchups, and talk about the strategies that I'm now using, and what things to purge, what not to purge, etc. With a charged coral oscillator, you can actually, if you can get enemies to circle you counterclockwise like this, this works actually even on lightweights that are pretty mobile, but it also works if you can get them to the outside of the map, so the wall's on your right, or if an enemy is trying to rush you down, if you can bleed out a lot of their energy while you backpedal with the FLUGEL's faster speed, they won't have enough energy to QB enough to go around your right side, so you can actually, you'll see this later when we get to the Zimmerman matchups. Something to be aware of, there is a bug with punching and I'm not sure what triggers it. It's pretty rare, but here you're going to see that the punching doesn't stagger extend and I bounce off. Not sure what's up with that, but just be aware of it. Okay, and here's how to beat Aurora Neb tanks. Honestly, in hindsight, I would ditch the Zimmerman and just run the Missile, Shield, Coral Blade, and then do the Charged Coral for the punish. Here I don't actually do this, but I'm just showing how the FLUGEL's faster speed paired with the Shield allows you to, and also the tank's nerf in speed has allowed us to kind of like draw out the chase a long time, and then if they do manage to close the gap we can go straight up, and they can't really aim very well with the nebula for right above them. If you get a map with not a lot of space, you're going to be in trouble. I'm not going to lie, it's very difficult to kite tanks like this on smaller maps because every corner they can cut, but I mean it just is what it is. I don't know what to tell you other than sometimes you get the bad map roll. So this one gives me lots of cover and the ability to just kite with the missiles here, you can see, for quite a long time. Yeah, and then even though I don't do it in this clip, just stagger with the missiles and then go into charge coral oscillator. That way you get to keep your space too, which is nice, and you can backpedal while you're doing the missiles. Just be aware you don't outrange the coral oscillator, that is. And save your assault armor for a punish, by the way, too. It's not really going to help you if they close the gap as a stagger extension. Okay, we're going to jump into kite matchups, all of the various kinds. They have roughly the same strategy, which is that we're going to usually ditch the shield if they're backpedaling kites, because we're not going to have the opportunity to use it, given that we can't be sitting in passive boost speed. But the booster on the FLUGEL speed is fast enough now that we can actually catch up to kites. It's like 475 versus the Kakaku's 450. So we're just going to keep poking them with the missiles. A key skill is going to be knowing when to swap to the Zimmerman without slowing down the reload on the missiles, because every time it's in the back it's reloading slower. So you want to minimize the amount of time that your shotgun's out. You want to just really quickly pop it out, pop the shot, swap back, and let the missiles continue to poke. Another important skill is going to be realizing that your assault armor is now your main punish for damage. You will get some with the coral oscillator, but your strategy here should be trying to set up enough stagger so that when you do get the coral oscillator slash, it staggers them. That way you don't have to worry about the long the long animation at the end, slowing you down, and you can just immediately pop your assault armor and cancel it for a punish. The goal, again, is to not get them the chance to pop the pulse armor off in time, which is normally a notorious problem with melee builds against kiters, that you can never reliably get the assault armor counter, so we're not even going to try. We're just going to save it for a punish, and try not to counter pop it. If they pop armor, just let it back up, let it bleed out, save it for another attempt. More often than not, you're just wasting it if you try to use it to counter their pulse armor. Here, another thing, try not to get staggered with your Zimmerman out. Otherwise you got to add the weapon swap time to get the missiles out later too. So again, I'm doing a poor job here of using the Zimmerman too much in my spare hand. It's much better just to keep the missiles doing the majority of the work. Here I do end up using the assault armor for the punish, which buys me enough time to get the Zimmerman just to poke the last bit of health. Here we got a different type of kiter here, more of like a reverse biped floating one. Same idea though, we usually just want to chase them down. Use the oscillator's true damage as to your benefit. It does a lot of damage even when not in ACS, so for these more fragile builds, the ACS punish is less of a concern for us. We can literally just chop them up with the oscillator. I do think the oscillator should have a little bit more damage, because when we get to the section of the video where we talk about poor matchups, you'll see how heavy bipeds just take an ungodly amount of slashes to kill, and so it's just not, I feel like it's underpowered, especially when you compare it to the pulse blades charge damage, so both regular and charge need to be buffed, I think. Yeah, using the assault armor for the punish again, this should literally make it so that the Zimmerman or the missile can just poke them to death at this point, so it's no real change in strategy here. I guess one thing to note is, do you need the EN recovery, in which case purge the shield, or are they more of like a kiter that just uses height? In which case you can keep the shield so that every time you drop, you can protect yourself while you're dropping to the ground and getting your energy back. In this case, I kept it just because I didn't think he was going to be, it wasn't so much speed as it was just his ability to go up that would be a problem. And so I keep the shield, and then I just worry about, like here you can see I'm using my, I'm trying not to stagger him here, but I do. As I drop down to the ground, I use the shield. I'm also using it because he's got an earshot, so I don't want to not have this tool against that build. So sometimes you got to make a call on the fly about whether or not the shield can afford to be purged. But a lot of times you cannot afford to purge the Zimmerman or the missiles for these kiting style builds.
At 30%.
Okay, now the more familiar Retsu Kite. This guy's running for meso legs, so he's going for pure boost speed here, obviously. He's not worrying about the Nox height. He's just going to be trying to backpedal me as much as possible. With that in mind, we're obviously not going to keep the shield, because this is just going to be a struggle to chase down. You can see I'm trying to keep the missiles on him, though, to keep just that impact predictably building up. If I can get close enough with enough energy to get a melee lunge, then I'm going to use it. As I do right here, and then use the assault armor as an additional punish. They're so fragile, it's not going to take much more than that, so don't worry about counter pulse armoring. They're probably going to get away with it if they get it off anyway, so just save it as a punish. And then you can also do it on prediction, so like if you do the lunge, you don't even have to wait to see if they pulse armor. You can just pop it, and either they pop it and you counter it, or they don't and they take the damage. Okay, so here, because I've secured the health lead, you'll notice that I'm forcing him to come to me. I'm not going to let him chase me all the way to the back of the map. I'm going to force him to come closer, and ideally just directly on top of me, which he doesn't want to do, because it gives me a head start on catching up to him. That's usually what we do by zoning people to the back of the map before we start using our energy to chase them, is we're just trying to get them as close to us so that they have to go directly over us as much with as little damage taken on our side as possible. So he's stubborn. I don't even mind taking a couple of pokes here with the missiles if I poorly dodge it. The time I've got too much health, he's got to rush me down. So, or at least reposition to give me the discount chase. I guess he's just really hoping I don't figure it out. But he ends up getting really close, and I can use that cover there to protect me from missiles and secure the slash. One more kite match here, just with the knock legs. Nothing really changes here, so I just purge the shield. Even though he is going a little vertical with the knock legs, he's not really a floating type. He's still more going for speed, so you can just see all the typical tactics that I always employ being used here. Again, a little sloppy on the Zimmerman, waiting a little too long or holding it out in my hand too long, which ends up costing me this rush down, but I still get the slash at least. Doesn't cost me the rush down, I should just say it made me take a lot more impact than I should have. Anyways, no more commentary to offer for this match, so we can resume when I get to the close range matchups now. Okay, so the various close-range kiters, basically the Viento equivalents. People have been still using the Sampu. I'm surprised. I would expect to still see the Viento. I still think it's better, but I guess if that's what they want to use, that's what they want to use. It can be it can feel like a tough matchup, but more often than not, it just means you're taking way too many hits without your shield. So either you're A-being at them, or... Oh, and by the way, I almost forgot to mention, you can try to pop off some missiles here, but I do find it's quite risky because they can close the gap fast. So get into the habit of swapping weapons and then purging with the same button. So you can see that I got the stagger extension bug there again on the punch. Not sure what's going on there, but... you win some, you lose some, I guess. He has to play quite cautious and keeping more space than he'd like with that slicer. Something to note is that it is faster upon recovery to pull the shield out than to quick boost away, and that goes for kicks as well. So don't even try to quick boost or you'll end up taking the hit. Just pull the shield out and mitigate it. I ended up losing that round just because of that bug, which is a bit of a shame. But... not to worry, we end up taking the match anyways. So I think it's probably safer just to purge the missiles. I liked the muscle memory for me is have the missiles out, shoot them R1, and then hold the left on the D-pad and press R1 again. That way you swap weapons and then purge the right one. I did have some trouble purging the wrong weapons when I first started this build, so it can be disorientating. So I just find it easier to memorize using the same button, R1. And just memorizing a sequence that swaps weapons and gets rid of it. So yeah, it's super fragile, and you should have the advantage with your shield. The trick is when they're really good at keeping you just out of Zimmerman's effective range, and in that case you need to be making sure you're QBing on a direction that intercepts them, like if they're kiting clockwise or counterclockwise, and they're at the right angle where like they're keeping distance but they're moving on your screen a little too much for the lunge to keep up. But you'll be surprised. The Oscillator has really good luck with fast-moving kiters. Okay, double Zimmermans. I think this is also the match where I get the charged Oscillator as well on him. So these heavy biped double Zimmermans are great for the charged Oscillator shot, by the way, just because you can backpedal for a lot of their energy, and then especially if you can get them so that there's a piece of cover on their left or your right as they're approaching you. Like you can see these pillars here. If I could bait him into it, which he doesn't fall right here, I'm not gonna do it here, but it is powerful. So you really cannot afford to miss your shield. Make use of the IG windows when you're against double Zimmermans. You need to block those or it's over. It shouldn't be hard. You got 1 second. You got 6 consecutive uses, so no excuses. Another interesting thing with the FLUGEL is our AB is now much more useful than the Kikaku for extracting from fights against other builds. It's not necessarily always going to work, especially against later ones, but having some trouble getting my hard lock here. It's not going to work against the faster ones, but it does now give you an option against some of the heavier builds that aren't running Brazel, that is. Or even if they are, as long as you can afford to take 1 or 2 hits, they'll fall behind once they run out of battery. So yeah, quite a useful tool now. We have the ability to extract from fights a little better than with the Kikaku. Okay, so here I'm just maximizing the shield's use. He's got the same one as me. I've noticed other people are now using this shield. I'm not saying I started it, but I think I did. So here I go for a punch stagger extension, which is risky. The Zimmerman is better, but I've noticed some bugs with it, so I'm still undecided on which one's optimal. I think as long as you've got the stability left, it might be worth it just to go for the punch, but fast movers will often be able to QB out of it, so you have to pick your type of target. Oh, I messed up the Zimmerman shot there. Tried to go for the charge one because I felt like I needed it to finish the fight there, or I was lost anyways. Okay, another Zimmerman matchup. This is the one where I managed to show the charged oscillator being used when they're A-Bing at you and there's something obstructing their left or your right side QB dodge to try to circle around. So they get funneled into the coral oscillator. But before we get to that, we'll watch the match here. So you can see how like trying to get around that shield with the oscillator is really helpful. If you can pull it off, it speeds up the impact race in your favor. I think I ended up losing the match here because he did manage to block it, I believe. Or sorry, I ended up losing that round. But I honestly, I feel like a lot of the melee weapons need a better PA interference stat. They should be doing double to triple impact multiplying against shields, because a lot of the IG windows reduce it by 80%. And melee is such a like the melee lunges. If you're going to be parrying melee, you shouldn't be able to use the middling shields to get such an effective reduction. You should be forced to use the PP buckler if you want to be getting like basically zero consequence parries. Over half a second is far too long on the PS shield, and then the one I'm using is also just unbelievably easy. Okay, no, this wasn't the match. I actually ended up losing this one. Okay, one more heavy biped double Zimmerman shield matchup here. Also, this is the one where I get the charged oscillator using the cover, so we'll see that in a little bit. This guy's using the PS shield, which is a little bit better for me. At least it's a little easier to slip in the coral oscillator with melee canceling, because I just got to delay 0.6 seconds after he pulls it. And he could flash it again, but I can also melee cancel again, so it becomes a bit of a rock, paper, scissors game, or maybe a 50-50. But I have a more generous shield, so I can afford to trade for longer than he can. See, I can block mine up for 6 seconds, so it's very reliable for me to block his Zimmermans, whereas for him, it's not so much on my one. So it ends up working out that I end up getting a better likelihood of blocking. You can see again the AB importance, and here's the charge. So you'll notice I bleed him out for battery while he's chasing me. And then I activate it, and he can't quite get there in time. If he had went for a kick, he might have got it. It was pretty close, though, so you can see what I mean, how the oscillator can be tricky, especially if you're behind cover, too, so they can't really see it starting, and then they come around the corner. It's kind of funny. Making use of the AB escape is also another thing that you're going to notice in this matchup a lot. As soon as you feel like if you start to fall behind, or if it feels like the trade up is not in your favor, or if you're finishing up a punish like I am right here, it is such a useful tool that you didn't have with the Kakaku, I've noticed. So here I kind of just try to block a couple things first, but you can see my speed is enough to get away from these heavy bipeds, especially if they've burned battery already. I'm going to try to get him with the coral oscillator charging him, but he doesn't fall for it this time. But you can see I'm trying to use the cover to limit his options. He should have went for a kick there, but I think he just was panicking because of the cover blocking him from dodging it. It's also a lot easier just to convince enemies to follow you on the outside of the map, with the wall being on your right. Okay, taking a look at another close range type build, the double stun guns. I'm pretty sure that the stun guns have had a change to their effectiveness on status buildup when hitting shields, because you'll see it in this fight, but I'm pretty sure I'm blocking a lot of this. But watch my my status buildup. Now the damage has been reduced, but I don't think the impact has. So you need to be careful. It's actually a bit of a threat in terms of staggering you just from the detonations alone. But yeah, you can see my status is building up super fast. In terms of strategy, just purge the missiles, you're running close range only. Everything else should feel pretty much the same. Okay, I guess we'll call them BSOs now. Basho. Well, he's not even running Basho. He's actually running the LM arms, probably just for recoil and yeah, just the ability to keep those on target. The strategy here is the same. Just purge the missiles. You're not going to need them because you're all close range, so better to keep the stagger extension at the ready, or at least the melee lunge at the ready, so you can counter assault armor, which is one really good use of the fists, by the way. So you're going to use that lunge to close the gap right on top of them and get the armor off. I failed to get a perfect hit, but here you can see how I'm spacing. I'm trying to I don't want to completely flee because he'll just chase me down. I want to try to tempt him to back up a little bit, give me some space so I can back away and see if I can get my impact regenerated. It doesn't become an option here, but I do it a couple times here. So there, I'm trying to see if he'll panic back up. And instead, I end up just baiting out the stagger when I'm in an unoptimal area to gain a lot of height and let the javelin hit me. But again, I'm going to be looking just for the Coral Oscillator into Assault Armor Punish. I'm not going to worry too much about getting a stagger extension punish on this. I don't end up getting it here, but actually maybe I do because I have the shield there. So you can see how even just a little bit of health was helping me out a lot there. I do end up getting it. It's not a ton of reduction, but it's more than you think more often than not. I don't do a great job of this, but again, you really do want to try to condition them such that the Oscillator's slash is the thing that staggers them, just to negate that long recovery animation from costing you anything. I don't do it here, but it's just worth noting. So on the flip side, you also want to get your Oscillator off cooldown, or on cooldown as quickly as possible so you're actually using it, but all it takes is 2 Zimmerman hits, so... Okay, we're going to look at the difficult matchups now. I'm just going to sum them off here. It's basically Lamb Missile Kites, just because they're still too fast and the EN cost while hovering is still too low. I feel like they should have to drop at about the 25-30 second mark, so there's at least 2 drops before most of these builds that can't evade their missiles because of the map rule at least get 2 opportunities to approach. So there are certain builds that can counter them for sure, but they're a little too locked, it's too much of a build check. So these guys are difficult. Heavy laser weapons are quite difficult as well, especially on heavy bipeds. Again, because the Coral Oscillator I feel like is just a little too low damage to chop off enough of their health every time you earn it. So again, use the charged Coral Oscillator both against these guys and the heavy bipeds might be a strategy. I didn't do it on these next clips, but I think it might actually be a great solution to get a bit more damage out, and also not needing to always stagger them to get the damage would be nice. So if they're just hovering at a set height, might be able to do that. And then one other tip for heavy biped lasers or heavy biped missiles is try to get above them so that when they drop and they're trying to do the elevator strategy on you, once they hit the ground, or they're just about to, that's the time to Coral Oscillator, because they can't keep dropping and they either come up into you or stay on the ground, but your hit is much more likely. If they're running a shield as well, you're kind of out of luck, because again, the shield's just, there's not enough PA interference on any melee weapons in the game yet.
AP at 50%.